Okay, welcome back to ThinkTech. It's the 11 o'clock block, and here we are at America finding its way, and America needs our help to finding its way. Tim Apicella, Stephanie Stahl-Dalton, Cynthia Sinclair, Winston Welch, our regular complement of individuals who complement each other in these discussions. So the title is The Danger of the Extreme Right in America. Should we be concerned? And I think I know the answer, but let's see if we can, have people give us more than just that. Tim, what is the extreme right in America? Shouldn't we be defining our terms here?
Good morning, Jay. The extreme right is a bunch of groups, horrible number of groups that have grown in the last 4 to 8 years. And they're groups of people who are disgruntled. They're the party of grievance, whether it's real or imagined. They blame government and they blame minorities. They blame everyone but themselves for their misfortunes in life. And that's the common thread, whether it be the KKK, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, 1488, all those groups all have a common thread of grievance and blaming someone else for the fact that they didn't get ahead in society in their life. And what do they hide behind? Their fellow grievance keepers and AR-15s. So the answer is yes, they are to be watched and to be concerned. I feel a lot better that Joe Biden's president and we have someone in the Justice Department that is going to start monitoring them and cracking down on them. And I'm glad there's 400 people who have been identified in the storming of the Capitol, and many of them have been arrested, and I'm sure some of them are going to be prosecuted. So good job.
You know what, though? I mean, we haven't had this problem, for all that long. I think it began in earnest in the 90s. Before then, it was really rare. And then we had more and more of these standoffs with guns and everything, and they wanted to bring the government down. I'm thinking of Timothy McVeigh also, who likes to bring federal buildings down and kill a lot of people in the process. And it's not just there's a nutcase needing psychiatric help. Is there a lot of people like that? I went and looked in preparation for the show on Wikipedia for a list of extreme right groups, and it took me to the page with paramilitary extreme right groups, which is, I don't know if it's synonymous, but it's real close. And there are hundreds of them. There weren't hundreds in 1990. Now there are hundreds of them, and they're all armed, and they all have those special badges you mentioned: grievances, perceived inferiority kind of complex, racism, supremacy, guns. And I will add one, because if you look at the definition of authoritarian and authoritarianism, which we're going to discuss at the next hour, you find that all assumes obedience, blind obedience. So these macho guys, and to a lesser extent women, with the guns and the hate and the inferiority complexes, they need to be obedient. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And so they're vulnerable.
Yeah. They also have another common thread running through all of them. They're a bunch of whining, sniveling poo butts, and they whine and they complain. I remember seeing videos of one guy who was put on a no-fly list after the insurrection of the Capitol, and he started crying like a little baby. And it wasn't mocked, it wasn't staged, it was the real deal. So they're a bunch of little babies, and they're immature little boys trapped inside men's bodies. And maybe that's why they call themselves Proud Boys. Who knows? But they're immature and they're whiners. That's pure and simple.
Maybe that's why they're going to flip. They're going to flip and testify about other people who were there on January 6th. Well, Stephanie, are you concerned? We go back and forth like a sine curve from optimism to pessimism. But if we study this subject, it's hard to be optimistic because of the growth of these organizations. On the other hand, as Tim has suggested, they're being rounded up now. They're being investigated. Some of them will be indicted and prosecuted. So does that make you unbalanced optimistic or pessimistic about them?
Well, I'm trying to get the reality of it. I differ from your view, Jay, in that they've not been there. They are there, and they've always been there. They're called other things. They're anarchists. They're assassins. We can go back to the assassination of the Empress of Austria. It was an anarchist that came coming out and killing her off the train. And then also, I think even relating way back in history to that time is Franz Joseph was assassinated by one of these anarchists or chaos people that are interested in disestablishmentarianism, I think it is. That was
spell that, will you? And then spell anti-disestablishmentarianism. Go ahead, do it. No, only kidding.
Oh, I get it. Remember that word from like the 6th grade or something. It was a long word. But anyway, so these are there. The ones who want chaos are there. Now, I think they've been here in the US. I think we have lots of them, just like there are lots in Europe, and I'm sure in the other countries too. But we know a lot more about, I think, the European history of it, and we know some of it here. Okay, but it hasn't risen to the heights that we have now. Certainly, Timothy McVeigh is a good example of the tip of the iceberg. But because of this last administration, that has given rise, in my humble opinion, my trying to make sense of it, that has opened the doors for these people to come out and get organized and get active and be known and have power. And that is why it's so dangerous to have an administration or leadership that is uninformed about this and or supporting it, for crying out loud. And I don't even know if the past president understands it or knows the history of this or connects it with Timothy McVeigh. So anyway, I'm just saying they're there. They've been allowed to come out. And I think this is one of Trump's accomplishments for himself, is to get these people active and voting and participating. But the way they participate is not well. Okay, so we need to work around this. Hopefully Biden administration has some ideas for coming up against it.
It's not so easy. You know, some people say that January 6th, allowed them to rub elbows and connect up using social media and other electronic connections. And now groups that were disparate, little silos around the country, know each other. And they know each other individually and as groups. And then you bring it all together. So just you get the paramilitary groups, you got the people in the military. There's investigations going on now about that. And in fact, it was in Minnesota, there was a very interesting op-ed piece last couple of days about how there's all these right-wing people in the military, and the military doesn't seem to recognize them. We're going to have a show about that next Monday. And then you got the QAnon, with the conspiracies and the big lie, buying into big lies. You got the ones who need, as I mentioned, authoritarianism. You got the ones with the guns who, treat the guns as a kind of phallic friend. You got religion. Don't forget religion, Cynthia. And you got, what Stephanie was talking about yesterday on Tim's show. You got these silos of ignorance in the South. They really are ignorant. And so you got all these points that seem to be disparate, but if you list them, they seem to be connected too. This strange bedfellows kind of thing. How do you see them going forward? Are they going to be stronger or weaker, in the year or 2 years to come?
I think they're going to continue to strengthen unless, Merrick Garland comes down so hard on the insurrectionists that they can't. Otherwise, they're going to. I myself am still just kind of sick about the fact that when there was a Black Lives Matter protest, just a few months beforehand, 100 people were, no violence, okay, 100 people were arrested on the spot. They have a thing called kettling where they can corral large groups, and they could have done that, but they didn't. Partly the reason why, though, that they were able to leave is because it was just the poor Capitol police boys that were still there. They still had not released the authorization for the backup to come and show up. So maybe I'll give them a little bit of a break, that it would have been hard to kettle anybody when, you know, half your force is gone. So, okay. But it seems to me, unless they come down really hard on these people, and I know that now they've got one person who is cooperating. Well, he entered a guilty plea and is cooperating. We don't know what he's saying or what exactly is going to happen yet.
He's the oath keeper. He was
Yeah.
the star of 60 Minutes last Sunday.
One of the top high head oath keepers, one of the founders too. So he's got information that goes deep, deep, deep. Social media isn't going away. These people that have been disconnected, like you said, you know, in these separate little factions all over the country, are now through social media being able to connect and cooperate and organize. And that's what they're doing. I have something from this, it's a book called Militias in the New Millennium. And there is a list of things that they have to do to get this, you know, this name of being a militia. Training in combat scenarios and weaponry skills in mock actions and maneuvers, has identifiable territory in which members reside, bases organization philosophies on anti-government rhetoric, development of contingency plans in case of governmental provocation, considers bombing, kidnapping, separatism, paper terrorism, or other extreme measures to protect the organic constitution. That one is the one. That's the one that gets me. This, well, 5 and 6 are the ones that get me. 6 is considers the viability of criminal activity to acquire weapons and explosives. So 5 and 6 are pretty scary. So are we at risk to these people going forward? Yes, absolutely, without a doubt.
Well, Winston, you know, yes, the Department of Justice is investigating and has indicated that they will prosecute. And that seems clear. I don't know if they're going to prosecute enough people to make me feel good. But at the same time, Congress has not started a truth commission, a commission on January 6th insurrection. A lot of well, nearly all of the Republican legislators have not taken action and won't take action against them. You know, even something so stupid as trying to avoid a metal detector. And they voted, you know, for the big lie on January 6th also. So a lot of them are not going to criticize. They're not going to prosecute. They're not going to pass legislation that deals with this. And that's a message, isn't it? That Congress is unable to do anything about this. You know, I guess I got to give them credit that the Senate under Mazie Hirono's leadership today adopted an anti-Asian race hatred bill. That was good. And that will undoubtedly pass in the House, and Joe Biden will undoubtedly sign it. But there is no voting rights bill, not to speak of. And there is no, you know, Black Lives Matter bill to speak of. And there is no anti-extremist groups bill to speak of. So what kind of message are these groups getting? Is Merrick Garland's statement yesterday enough to dampen their you know, maneuvering, or are they just going to continue right along, Winston? Don't be too optimistic about this. You may be pessimistic if you wish.
You know, for some reason, I don't think they're putting Merrick Garland's statement on Parler today, so they don't really care. I don't think they know who he is, and the Attorney General. I'm not sure that they, you know, they still believe Donald Trump's the president. So, you know, what is this far right wing or extreme right wing? Yes, the expression is Timothy McVeigh, but it's always been there in America. And I think, you know, when Cynthia was reading off that list of things, I thought, well, maybe they just consider that an extension of the Second Amendment, you know, having your own tank or whatever. It's your arms, the right to bear arms. Should it be, you know, I mean, why would it stop at an AK-47 when you can have your own tank? And I think you may be able to have a tank, scarily enough. But we have to remember these ideologies, as you mentioned, Wikipedia, the source of all knowledge. It says other ideologies or organizations that feature aspects of ultranationalist, chauvinist, xenophobic, theocratic, racist, homophobic, transphobic, or reactionary views. And of course, it can lead to oppression, violence, forced assimilation, ethnic cleansing, or genocide based on ethnic group, nation state, national religion, dominant culture, etc. Yeah, a lot of this reminds me of if you were looking at the far left, you could replace a lot of these words in there of an extreme left agenda. I mean, North Korea fits into there very easily when you look at that, or parts of China where you're just saying, okay, this is so. You know, extreme of any side is wrong. Of course, it's easier to see the right because they seem to be more armed and more in power. Certainly, when you have Marjorie Taylor Greene, she just, I don't, on some level, you know, at least she was open about wanting to start her, what was the Anglo-Saxon League or whatever, Justice Warriors or whatever it is she wanted to do. So they're a little bit more open about it. I also read yesterday that the post office has been investigating all of us, which is an interesting one too. And I don't think my postal carrier probably really cares for that. But did you see that article?
Yeah, they're quite remarkable that it doesn't seem to fit within the mission of the post office at all. And yet the post office is watching you.
Well, and you know, I mean, if you think about it from the perspective of the postal carrier, and you're paranoid about the government, do you really want an agent of the government coming to your house every day, or are you going to view him or her as a threat? And I think that's why the postal carriers, there was some point in there where they wanted them to squeal on people that they did whatever for whatever reasons, and the postal carriers were like, oh no, we're not going there because, you know, we value our lives. So but as far as these groups go, they've always been there. I think that as we move ahead though, you know, America's changing. It's changing, and it has been changing before our very eyes. And so these folks are, they're upset, they're scared, they're wondering what the future is going to bring. It doesn't look like them. It doesn't look like what they grew up with their grandparents. And so they're worried about what is America going to look like when it's not what my grandparents grew up with. And so all of that has been fueled by the last 4 years. And around the world, we've seen this sort of xenophobic tendencies. And as climate change forces mass migrations and these sorts of things, that people that have been oppressed forever are starting to claim their rights, it's going to be a natural counter reaction to this. But I think, you know, we're also coming up against the TikTok generation. So you haven't been on TikTok, go on TikTok for about 30 seconds. And that's about the attention span that we're looking at of people that are on TikTok. So these other ideas, they're not going to have any, you'll be so marginalized as a young person to hold these ideas or to express them. I don't even know where they would find those groups to join, but they are scary. They're out there. And hopefully we have like 20 spy agencies, don't we, that are theoretically not investigating us while they're investigating us. If the post office is doing it, probably there's other organizations that have their finger all over these groups. So,
that'll really surprise me if the post office saves us from the extreme right-wing groups. That'll surprise me. Tim, I want to ask you, you know, given the risk, whatever it is, given the threat, whatever it is, what do we do to deal with this? Do we prosecute? Do you investigate? What kind of legislation could the federal government adopt if there was an anti-extremist, you know, right-wing violence, you know, bill? What would it say? What could it say within our general notion of the First Amendment?
Well, the federal government did this sometime in the 1930s against the Ku Klux Klan, and they infiltrated.
They sure did a good job about that, didn't they?
Well, it could have been worse. But they infiltrated the Klan. They infiltrated, and they actually did. You know, you're not going to, it's like cockroaches here in Hawaii. You don't get rid of all of them, but you get them to the point where they scamper and they hide under a rock or something, and, you know, they stay there. And I think that's the same with our supremacist groups. They're like cockroaches, and you're never going to quite get rid of them all, but you at least can make them go take cover, and they don't come out in the light of day. And I think that's what the job of the Justice Department and the FBI. That's their job, to investigate, infiltrate, monitor, and when they get out of hand, prosecute and incarcerate.
Suppose you have one of those incidents where somebody's holed up cult-like in a house, like in Texas a few years ago, with guns. Because
Ruby Ridge.
Ruby
Ruby
Ridge.
Ridge,
They got
yeah.
they got a right to be there, and the ATF cannot stop them and so forth, and they get into a shootout. What would you do then? Would you go in less aggressively or more aggressively?
Well, they played into their hands. I mean, that became a martyr situation, and it became, a date to remember by all supremacist groups, the date of Ruby Ridge. What you do is you go after them legally for things that are benign, not paying their taxes, all the legal tools that the federal government has to bring you forth in an indictment, and take them out that way. Once you play into their hands, they've got AR-15s, and they'd love to get on the 6 o'clock news. That's what they hope for, and you don't want to play into that hand, so you avoid it. You get them, you infiltrate, you investigate, and then you get them on other charges.
How important is gun control on this?
Well, extremely important, to the point where if you have a 60 round clip, getting rid of those things are very important. But remember, they're already in the hands of all these groups. It's not like sales will stop tomorrow at a gun shop and they won't have any. They already have tons and piles of munitions and clips and semi-automatic rifles and pistols. So they already have them. So gun control is important, and particularly on the point of mental health, and closing the loopholes on gun shows. But like I said, it's a matter of taking care of which is already out there in the marketplace, and that is a lot of weapons and a lot of munitions. And you're just going to have to start monitoring it and making sure that they don't get formation of groups and strength on social media, and very closely monitor social media for these groups.
Yeah, even if that somehow runs against the First Amendment. But let's go to you, Stephanie. One of the things that came out in the 60 Minutes piece on the Oath Keepers was that a lot of their members are former military, fighters on the ground, paratroopers, that sort of thing, and well-skilled in hand-to-hand combat, well-skilled in small arms, well-skilled in doing the things that the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys like to do and drill in the woods, that kind of thing. And he was proud of that they were former military. And I would go a step further and say there's a lot of people in the military right now that are potentially extremists or actually extremists, even while they're in the service of the United States. What can we do about that?
Well, I respect the training that's needed for people in the military. And yes, they are highly skilled, and in particular are the Marines. So I know these people can do a lot of things whenever they want, with or without weapons, after the good training that they get through the armed forces. But there's another issue there, the ethics system and the appropriate use of it and that sort of thing. I mean, we are still maybe learning. Your questions are asked, Jay, about what to do. I mean, we had a period of time with Janet Reno, not only the Ruby Ridge horror show, but then we had the Branch Davidians and going in there literally with tanks and running the place down. So hopefully we've got some history here and some education to get to some of the points Tim was making, which I think are so good. So we've got to know how to come at it in a different way. Same thing with the military. So I think that the guns sales are up every time there's another shooting. Like now, they're daily. So the gun sales people are doing well, and or at least weekly. There are these awful situations, but the sales are up every time that happens. So all of this is moving along, and we have to learn better how to deal with all of it, and then we have to set up some action and some criteria for what is going to happen. And I wanted to just remind everybody that the Anglo-Saxons, speaking of the Anglo-Saxons, they are the Brits, by the way. They're not the rest of the world or the Europeans. I'm not an Anglo-Saxon. And these are only Brits. And they're, by the way, the worm is turning a bit on one of their princesses and their attitude towards him. But the point is that the Anglo-Saxons are pretty smart people. And Britain has no gun problem. And their police do not have guns, okay? So we have some UK examples, in addition to Australia, other examples in other countries of how they are handling these weapons that are killing. And we need, and I think we have the administration that can do meet the challenge of examining, studying, and trying to see what America needs to do to.
Yeah, you're right. It does require a social psychological study, and perhaps we don't have this positive research on that yet. Cynthia, doesn't it make sense that when these people are suggestible, that they migrate toward authoritarian figures and they're obedient to a fault with authoritarian, and that binds them? It's a common denominator, but it also galvanizes them. That all you have to do is get the authoritative figure and stop him or her somehow. Doesn't it make sense? And how can you do that?
Well,
like Trump.
too pervasive to just be able to get one. Like, take Trump out, we might be able to make them go back into their corners, But I think if you took out all the head guys, and depending on how you take them out too, like Tim was saying, that'll just
You
incite.
mean take him out of the picture, don't you? You mean take him out of the formula?
Yeah, take them out of the picture, not take them out, but yeah, take them out of the picture. Yeah. Thank you.
Just want to make sure we understand each other here.
I'm not killing anyone. Don't get me wrong. Okay, thank you. All I know is what's been happening in the courts, and I'm going back to January 6th because that's when they were just, prolificating so much. And that is that most all of them, there's only a handful that are in custody still. They had their first, appearance before the judge, and he sent them home to wait for their trial. Some of these guys, should not have happened. Now, some of them, I know DC went after them and said, wait a minute, to a DC judge, prosecutors took it to a DC judge and said, this can't happen. Look what this guy did. You can't let him run around. And so some of them slowly are starting to go back into being incarcerated while they wait for their trial. But I haven't seen we hear hints of it, but I haven't seen one single charge of sedition, not even one. How come? It's obvious, even to a dumb, a person like me, that it's sedition. So why aren't any of these people being charged with it? Especially some of the higher ups that they've already found all of the communications that they were having between the different groups as they were trying to coordinate their attack on the 6th. So if they've got all this, why aren't they going after these people a little bit stronger?
A great question to pose to Winston.
Okay.
Why, Winston? Why does Nancy not go after them? Why do we not see them in the Hoosgow?
They're going after them, and they're going after them in the way like Tim is suggesting. They're doing their forensic analysis. You can bet $1 zillion that the government at the highest levels has quintupled its efforts and money and investigations on all of these groups. I have zero doubt about that. And they're going after they're looking at their bank accounts. They're looking after any social media. They're looking after their friends and family. They're putting together the tales, the trials, the narratives, and they will peel them off one by one, and they will stand the trial accordingly. And that's how it's going to happen.
Well, there's a lot of people who are not necessarily in the same criminal bucket, And,
but those folks, and those are the folks we can reach, because those are the folks that are afraid of change. And so, if a rising tide lifts all boats, you can't get rid of racism and sexism and homophobia, but you can legislate against it as much as possible. So you say, you must have 40% of your board be women. Okay, that's a legislation in some.
What
in some
about doing the
countries.
kinds of things that China's doing with a social quotient, a social score? In other words, if you want to misbehave, then you can't ride the train, you can't take a plane, you don't get a job, you can't make a loan or buy a house.
No, that's not who we are as a people. Who we are is appealing to our best nature and educating ourselves and lifting this up. It's not about this. No, that's not the. That is
Okay,
not.
I got it.
That's not our role model.
I only asked you so I could get that answer.
No, no, thank you.
All right, look, we're almost out of time. Let's go around the track here, counterclockwise. Winston, what's your last comment to leave with people?
Happy Earth Day. Do what you can to save our precious home, our precious planet. Start with yourself, work your way out, and we can achieve a love for our fellow mankind and for our planet at the same time. It just requires some concerted effort and individual thought. And that's my thought I'm going to leave you all with today.
Okay. Cynthia, yours. What would you like to leave with people today?
Well, you asked me not to forget religion, so I'm not going to forget religion. I think it's very important for these people, and if they're listening, or if you know anybody that is like this and thinking this way, God does not want this kind of behavior. The Bible does not support that kind of stuff. And until Christians stop trying to pervert the word to justify your actions, change the way your actions are to match the word instead.
Okay, Cynthia Sinclair. Stephanie, I want to compliment you again on your notion of public service, of national service, because I think that's a major suggestion. I hope the Biden administration is watching our shows, because that one really could have a salient effect. Anyway, what is your last remark?
I hope that, and that's certainly no new idea, and many people have talked about it, but let's try and mention it to people who might have some influence, and I'll do everything I can to do that. If anybody says anything about it, give them money or $5 or whatever, or support them. I just wanted to mention that I said Janet Reno, and that was a former attorney general who went at these domestic terrorists in that brutal way. And so that's an example of maybe how not to do it, and get back more into what Tim is suggesting that our law enforcement is going to pursue. But we do need domestic terrorism laws, as I have learned. We have none. So I think one of the things holding up the Capitol and the issues that Cynthia brings up is that we don't have the tools to manage these situations. So we need the Congress to get to do that. So we have to just work on supporting and looking to see if we can get DC in as a state, the Douglas area, they're going to call it, and we'll get some more heft in the Senate for moving towards these kinds of goals and getting some sanity back and bringing everybody to understand who we are, as Winston's telling us, that we're humane and we're taking the high road.
Okay, Tim, I'd like your last comment, but I'd like to ask a question also. How is the extreme right going to play in the 2022 election?
Well, they're emboldened right now. They feel quite emboldened, especially after January 6th. So they're going to try to play their hand as best they can. They're going to try to get on the media. Again, media has a responsibility not to let these cretins on. But they're going to do everything they can to get their notoriety and some press time. So expect that. Will they influence the election? No, I don't think they will. But I just want to make a point that Nancy Pelosi.
Let me add one thing to that. They may influence the election by making themselves look so bad that ordinary people will be rejecting them.
Right, exactly. And that's what we're hoping to see. The more they think they're emboldened, the more they think they're important, the worse they look. Even to people who are of the GOP. Hang on here. I've got this animal here that I'm trying to fend off, and I normally lock it up, but he's really harassing me right now. But I'm going to get to the point that Nancy Pelosi has given a kind of a green light for this commission. Right now, they're wrestling on how to subpoena, whether it's the committee that subpoenas or is it the group as a whole, how the subpoena process is going to take place. So that's a big part of what they're trying to wrestle through right now. And the last part is Joe Biden has, through DHS, has allowed grants to go out in the community to educate the community about the nature of these hate groups and how little and small and petty they are. So it's an education process as well. The more we learn about them, the more we are disgusted with them, and the faster and sooner, like a cockroach, they'll go back under the rock and scurry and hide.
Yeah, well put for all of us. Well, I only have two comments to make. One is that no animal was injured in the making of this production.
It was close. It was close.
Afterward, we can't talk about. And the other is it's okay to remain friendly with your postal service carrier. Thank you, Tim Apicella. Thank you, Stephanie Dalton. Thank you, Cynthia Sinclair. Thank you, Winston Welch. You guys are great. See you next time. Aloha.
Aloha.